When was the last time you broke an egg and ate the yolk without worry? If you're like many people over 50, that thought probably makes you hesitate. Perhaps you were told decades ago that yolks raise cholesterol and will clog your arteries. Maybe you grew up hearing that line so often that it became a rule. Separate the white, toss the yellow, and be safe. I remember Mr. Hung, 62, who came to my clinic with chest complaints and fatigue. He told me with pride, "Doc, I've skipped yolks for 20 years. I don't touch them." Yet his lab work showed high LDL, low HDL, and borderline vitamin D deficiency. He looked drained. He expected me to praise his discipline, but instead I asked, "What else did you swap in for those yolks?" "Bread and sweet cereals," he said. "Margarine on toast, less fresh food." That answer explained a lot. I'm Dr. Nguyen, and I've been caring for people in midlife and beyond for more than 2 decades. I've listened to the fears, the old advice, the family rules. I've also followed the science as it evolved. And today I want to tell you plainly, the story about egg yolks being the enemy of older hearts is not the whole story. In fact, our understanding has changed substantially. This isn't about telling you to eat eggs recklessly. It's about replacing fear with facts and making choices that help you stay strong, sharp, and independent as you age. So stay with me for the next little while. I'll walk you through the biology, the recent studies, the nutritional value of the yolk, cultural reasons that fear stuck with us, and real-life examples of people who gained energy and clarity when they made small, sensible changes. By the end, I want you to feel empowered, not scared, when you stand in front of your fridge and see an egg. Why talk about egg yolks? Because for those of us over 50, every meal matters differently than it did at 30. Muscle strength, bone density, memory, and metabolic balance become priorities. The right nutrients, consumed consistently, can be the difference between a vibrant life and a life slowed by frailty, falls, or cognitive decline. Wrong ideas that persist for decades can quietly rob us of those nutrients. In the 1970s and 80s, public health warnings simplified a complex picture for the masses. Cholesterol in food raises cholesterol in blood. That message was urgent and well-intentioned, meant to curb growing heart disease rates. But simplifications became rules. Avoid egg yolks, avoid liver, avoid certain animal fats. The messaging stuck. Food manufacturers responded with low cholesterol and fat-free products. Many of my patients replaced wholesome breakfasts with processed alternatives and felt they were making healthy choices. Yet years later, many still had heart disease, type 2 diabetes, or low energy. This matters because the cost of following outdated guidance is subtle but cumulative. When you remove nutrient-dense foods like whole eggs and replace them with refined carbs and sugary cereals, you may reduce one nutrient, but you increase insulin spikes and inflammation. Over time, this raises visceral fat, harms blood glucose control, and weakens muscle. For someone entering retirement age, those shifts can reduce mobility and independence. Moreover, older adults often face specific deficiencies: vitamin D from reduced skin synthesis, choline needed for brain function, lutein and zeaxanthin important for eye health. These are real, measurable needs. If the fear of cholesterol leads you to skip the yolk, a natural source of many of these nutrients, you may inadvertently increase the risk of conditions you want to prevent. Beyond physiology, there's quality of life. A comforting breakfast of eggs with vegetables can anchor your day. Eating should nourish the body and the spirit. When fear steals pleasurable, nutrient-rich foods from our plates, it can reduce joy and social connection. And there's the economic and practical angle. Eggs are affordable, easy to prepare, and accessible. For people on fixed incomes or with limited appetite, eggs deliver a dense package of nutrition in a small volume, a huge advantage. Finally, this topic matters because the evidence landscape has changed. Scientific committees and dietary guidelines have moved away from blanket cholesterol limits, but habits and headlines lag behind research. If you are still avoiding yolks because of a rule from decades past, this conversation is about gently updating that rule to better match current knowledge while still honoring individual medical needs. In short, what you eat at breakfast can influence your heart, brain, bones, and mood for years to come. That is why this simple food matters so much. Let's be clear about the biology. Your liver produces the majority of the cholesterol circulating in your blood, roughly 70 to 80%. Only about 20 to 30% comes from dietary sources. Your body regulates cholesterol production. When more comes from food, the liver reduces its own output. When less is consumed, the liver increases production to maintain necessary levels. Cholesterol itself is not a villain. It is a crucial building block for cell membranes, steroid hormones, bile acids, and vitamin D synthesis. Early epidemiological studies showing associations between high blood cholesterol and cardiovascular disease were important but limited. Observational data can suggest relationships, but they cannot prove causation in the presence of many confounding factors. As research methods improved and randomized long-term cohort studies multiplied, the role of dietary cholesterol became more nuanced. Large meta-analyses and cohort studies over the past 2 decades, including work from major centers like Harvard and data reviews cited by major health organizations, have generally found that for most healthy adults, moderate intake of eggs does not increase cardiovascular risk. In 2015, the U.S. Dietary Guidelines Committee removed the previous numerical limit on cholesterol intake, recognizing that dietary cholesterol is not a nutrient of primary concern for overconsumption. We must also consider lipid subtypes. LDL cholesterol is not uniform. Particle size and density matter. Small, dense LDL particles are more atherogenic than larger, buoyant LDL particles. Some studies indicate that dietary cholesterol, and eggs in particular, tend to increase LDL particle size, shifting away from small, dense forms, while also raising HDL, the protective cholesterol. That combination can be neutral or even beneficial in terms of risk. That said, not everyone responds the same. A subset of people, often called hyperresponders, show greater increases in blood cholesterol when consuming dietary cholesterol. For these individuals, monitoring by their physician is reasonable. But even in many hyperresponders, the change includes rises in both LDL and HDL, and cardiovascular risk impact depends on the overall diet matrix and lifestyle. Most importantly, modern evidence points to other dietary culprits having stronger causal links to heart disease. Industrial trans fats, excessive added sugars, and refined carbohydrates that promote insulin resistance and chronic inflammation. These are the foods to fear more than the yolk. In clinical practice, I evaluate each patient's cardiovascular risk holistically: family history, blood pressure, smoking, glucose tolerance, inflammatory markers, and lipid particle analysis when appropriate. For most patients, including those over 50, a moderate intake of whole eggs, one per day or so, fits into a heart-healthy pattern rich in vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, and healthy fats. Now let's open the yolk and see what's inside. An egg yolk is a small nutrient factory. It contains choline, a nutrient essential for cell membranes and acetylcholine synthesis, important for memory and cognition. Choline intake tends to be low in many adults, and older adults are especially vulnerable to shortfalls. The yolk also provides lutein and zeaxanthin, carotenoids concentrated in the retina that protect against age-related macular degeneration and support overall eye health. For anyone over 50, preserving vision is a priority, and dietary sources of these carotenoids matter. Vitamin D appears in the yolk as well, a rare natural food source. Vitamin D helps with calcium absorption and bone health. Older skin makes less vitamin D from sunlight, so dietary sources become more important to prevent osteoporosis and fractures. Further, yolks supply omega-3 fatty acids, particularly in eggs from hens fed omega-3 rich diets, vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin K, selenium, and B vitamins, including B12 and folate. These micronutrients support immune function, antioxidant defenses, and energy metabolism, all relevant to aging bodies. Egg protein has high biological value, meaning the amino acids are in a ratio that is highly usable by the human body. Maintaining muscle mass after 50 is essential to preserve mobility and reduce fall risk. Compared to many processed breakfast foods, eggs deliver high-quality protein with fewer empty calories. Practical eating patterns matter. An egg with spinach and whole grain toast offers fiber, protein, healthy fats, and micronutrients. A balanced start that keeps blood sugar steady and reduces mid-morning cravings. Contrast that with refined cereal and sweetened milk. A rapid insulin spike followed by a crash. If you are concerned about saturated fat, note that eggs are relatively modest contributors compared to processed meats and full-fat dairy. Choosing preparation methods wisely, boiled, poached, or lightly pan-fried in olive oil, and pairing eggs with vegetables and whole grains optimizes benefit. For many older adults, affordability and simplicity matter. Eggs are inexpensive, shelf-stable for a reasonable time, and easy to prepare. For someone with poor appetite or difficulty chewing, an egg's soft texture and nutrient density make it an ideal choice. In short, the yolk is not just safe in moderation for most people, it is a concentrated source of nutrients that older adults often lack. Food carries memory. For many of us, eggs are wrapped in childhood scenes. The morning light on a frying pan, the smell of butter, the quiet ritual of breakfast with family. Those sensory memories are part of our identity. Then, with the rise of dietary anxiety in past decades, we were taught to fear parts of that memory, the yolk, and many of us complied out of care and caution. The cultural shift was massive. Only egg whites became a badge of health consciousness. Entire product lines emerged to meet that fear. But here's the cultural irony. While we were avoiding the yolk, we increasingly consumed convenience foods that were ultra-processed, high in sugar and refined oils. We traded a nutrient-rich traditional bite for empty calories and additives. I've seen this pattern across generations and geographies. Grandparents who lived long, active lives often ate simple, whole foods, including eggs. Their longevity was likely due to a combination of diet, physical activity, social engagement, and lower exposure to industrialized, processed food chemistries. Our modern modernities, sedentary jobs, stress, processed snacks, have introduced new risks that cannot be blamed on the humble yolk. There's also the power of habit and fear. Patients tell me, "My mother warned me. My doctor once said to avoid yolks." These messages stick. Changing them requires more than evidence. It requires cultural conversation. Restoring trust in whole foods, teaching balanced preparation, and emphasizing lifestyle patterns over single food fixations. Reclaiming the yolk is in part reclaiming culinary pleasure and tradition. It's about reconnecting with nourishing rituals that sustain both body and spirit as we age. Let me tell you about Mrs. Mai, 58. For a decade, she avoided yolks, ate low-fat, packaged breakfasts, and took pride in healthy choices. Yet she complained of fatigue, forgetfulness, and brittle nails. Her labs showed low vitamin D and borderline low choline. I suggested a simple change: add back one whole egg each morning, pair it with leafy greens and whole grain toast, reduce sugary snacks, and walk 30 minutes most days. 3 months later, Mrs. Mai returned smiling. Her energy improved, she felt mentally sharper, and her labs showed a modest rise in HDL while total cholesterol remained stable. She told me, "I feel like I gave my mornings back." This story isn't proof that eggs are a panacea, but it is an example of how small, evidence-based adjustments often produce meaningful results. If you have cardiovascular disease or a specific lipid disorder, consult your doctor. But for most older adults, the weight of current evidence supports that one whole egg a day can be part of a healthy pattern. So here's my question to you, gently and respectfully. Will you continue to discard the golden yolk because of an old fear? Or will you consider the updated science and give it a cautious, informed place back on your plate? Share your experience below. Tell me your concerns, and let's have an honest conversation. Together, we'll weigh the evidence and find what's best for you.